The Queen's strange proposal. The ship was on fire. Smoke filled the small cockpit as alarm screamed. Captain Darren Ross, a human pilot from Earth, pressed buttons with shaky fingers. The controls were dead. His ship spun toward an alien planet below, clouds rushing closer. "This is it," he whispered, his voice calm but his heart racing. The ship crashed hard. Metal groaned, trees shattered, and the earth shook. Then, silence. Darren woke up, hanging, upside down from his seat. His head hurt. Blood ran down his temple. He unstrapped himself and crawled out of the wreckage. All around him were tall, purple trees and glowing plants. The air smelled strange. He wasn't on Earth anymore. He took a step forward, and something struck him from behind. When he woke again, he wasn't alone. Darren was lying on a cold stone floor. His arms were tied behind his back. Strange alien guards stood around him, tall and armored, their faces hidden by masks. One guard spoke in a language he didn't understand. Then another one injected something into his neck. The world spun again. When he opened his eyes, he was in a grand hall made of shining black stone. Golden banners hung from the high walls. Alien creatures bowed low as a tall figure walked toward him. She was beautiful, in a terrifying way. The alien queen. Her skin was silver blue. Her eyes glowed like stars. A long cloak trailed behind her, and a crown floated just above her head without touching it. She looked down at him with interest. "So, you are the human who fell from the sky," she said. Her voice was smooth, deep, and powerful. Darren didn't speak. He was too stunned. The Queen smiled. "I have been watching Earth for many years," she said. "I always wondered what your kind was truly like. Now, I will find out." The guards untied Darren. He rubbed his wrists. "What do you want from me?" he asked carefully. Her reply shocked him. "I want you," she said, "to marry me." Silence. Darren blinked. "What?" "I want you to become my mate, to live in my palace, to help me create the next generation of royal leaders." He stared at her like she was mad. "You want kids? With me?" The Queen laughed gently. "You are not the first human to ask that. But yes, my bloodline must survive. My people are dying. Your DNA is strong, pure. You could save us." Darren took a step back. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she said. "You are brave. You are smart. And most important, you have no place to return to now. Your ship is gone." He looked down. She was right. Still, something felt wrong. "Why me?" he asked. "Why not one of your own?" The Queen's face changed. For just a moment, her strong expression cracked and sadness showed through. "My people cannot survive much longer. Too many wars, too much poison in our blood. Our children are born weak. But when one of my ancestors took a human lover, the child was strong. Now?" Darren understood. She wasn't just trying to save her kingdom, she was desperate to save her family. Still, marriage? He shook his head. "You don't even know if I'll agree." "You don't have a choice," she said calmly. "The agreement is ready. If you accept, you will have power, riches, a royal life. If you refuse..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Guard stepped forward again. Darren raised his hands. "All right, I'll think about it." The Queen smiled again. "You have until the next moon rises." With that, she turned and walked away, her cloak swirling like a shadow. Later that night, Darren sat alone in a room made of glass. Stars shone above him. Alien servants brought him warm food and clean clothes. He touched the edge of the royal robe they gave him. Marry an alien queen? Father her heirs? Was he still dreaming? He closed his eyes. Somewhere deep in the palace, he thought he heard someone crying. But when he stood to find the sound, Two guards blocked his way. "Stay," one said coldly. Darren slowly sat back down. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. Royal wedding, or political trap. The royal hall echoed with music, strange, haunting music that made Darren's skin crawl. He stood still, wearing golden robes that didn't feel like his own. Two alien servants carefully adjusted his collar, while another placed a shining metal band on his wrist. It wasn't just for looks, it was a tracker. A soft beep confirmed it. Darren didn't smile. Today was his wedding day, and he still wasn't sure if he was the groom or a prisoner. All around the palace, the walls were covered in glowing flowers and floating banners. Alien nobles walked by, their long robes brushing the ground. They looked at Darren with cold eyes, whispering in their language. None of them looked happy. None of them wanted a human in their royal family. The queen stood at the top of the grand staircase, wearing armor shaped like flower petals. Her crown floated above her again, pulsing with light. She walked slowly, proudly, toward Darren. When she reached him, she placed her hand on his chest. "This is a historic moment," she said, her voice loud so the entire court could hear. "Today, our future begins with a human beside me." No one clapped, not even the guards. They stood before a glowing altar. A priest-like creature chanted something strange. Darren could barely understand the translation coming through his ear implant. He kept thinking, what if I say no now? What will happen to me? He looked up. The queen was watching him closely, smiling, but not with her eyes. After the ceremony, there was a grand feast. Creatures with wings served glowing drinks and plates of steaming food. But Darren wasn't hungry. His stomach felt twisted. He noticed that many seats at the long royal table were empty. Were people boycotting the wedding? Across the table sat a tall alien general with dark green armor. He hadn't spoken a word all evening, but he never looked away from Darren. Not once. Later that night, as the queen led Darren through the long halls of the palace, she spoke in a quiet voice. "You did well." "I didn't really have a choice," he replied. She stopped walking, turned to him. "You think I forced you?" she asked softly. Darren met her eyes. "Didn't you?" There was a pause. Then she stepped closer. "I gave you power, protection, purpose. You were lost. Now you're part of something bigger." He didn't respond. He just followed her. They entered her private chambers. Giant windows looked out over the stars. The room was warm and glowing. There were guards outside, but no one else inside. She poured him a drink and handed it to him. He took it but didn't drink. The queen looked at him with a strange sadness. "You think I want to do this?" she said. "This marriage isn't for love. It's for survival. My people are dying. If they knew what I truly wanted, they'd remove me." Darren's eyes narrowed. "Then why bring me here? Why marry me?" "Because," she said, walking to the window, "you're different. Your kind never gives up even when everything is broken." She turned back to him. "And maybe I was tired of being alone." That night, Darren lay awake in the royal bed. The queen slept far on the other side. The palace was quiet, but his mind was loud. He thought about Earth, about freedom, about the general's eyes staring at him. Was this really a wedding, or a carefully made trap? Suddenly, crash. A sound outside the chamber made him jump. He grabbed a sharp silver blade from the wall and rushed to the door. But before he could open it, the guards burst in. "Someone tried to poison the queen's drink," one shouted. "And yours." They looked at Darren's untouched cup on the table. His blood ran cold. Someone in the palace wanted him dead. This wasn't a honeymoon. This was a war, and the wedding might have just been bait. The forbidden chamber. Darren couldn't sleep. Not after what happened. The attempted poisoning changed everything. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was a target. Someone in the palace wanted him gone. Maybe more than one. He stared at the ceiling of the royal chamber. The queen slept silently on the far side of the bed, her back turned. Even now, she seemed calm, as if poison was just another part of politics. But Darren had learned one thing already. Nothing here was what it seemed. The next morning, guards followed him everywhere. Even when he walked through the garden, they stood behind the trees, silent, watching. He needed answers. He needed to know what kind of world he had married into. And most of all, he needed to know why he kept hearing that sound every night. A soft, muffled sobbing, coming from deep inside the palace walls. Later that day, a servant brought him to the royal library. There, shelves stretched up toward the sky. Scrolls floated in the air like birds. Darren tried to read, but his eyes kept going back to one word. He saw again and again. Sealed. Room sealed. File sealed. Bloodline sealed. Secrets were everywhere. That night, he followed the sound again. This time, carefully, silently. He waited until the queen fell asleep. Then, barefoot, he walked out of the chamber and down the dark hall. 2 guards stood at the far end, but they were distracted, arguing quietly. Darren slid behind a statue and took a different path, one he had memorized during the day. He followed, the sound through narrow halls past broken statues and old paintings, until finally, he found it. A black iron door stood at the end of the hallway. It was different from all other doors in the palace, thick, cold. It hummed with strange energy. Runes glowed across the surface, and behind it, yes, he could hear the crying. He reached for the handle. Don't, a voice came from behind. He spun around, blade in hand, but it wasn't a guard. It was the queen, wearing only her night robe, hair loose over her shoulders, her glowing eyes locked onto his. How did you find this place? She asked. I followed the sound, Darren said quietly. Someone's in there. The queen looked at the door, then back at him. I warned you never to wander, she said. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. Is someone locked inside? He asked. Yes, she replied. There was a pause. Then she added, my child. Darren froze. Your child? The queen stepped closer. Before you came here, I tried to save my race once before. A human scientist was taken, forced to assist us. He died shortly after the child was born. Darren felt cold. The child, she said, is not like others. Half human, half royal. A miracle, but dangerous. She touched the door with her palm. The runes lit up. The crying stopped. I raised her in secret. But she was feared, hated. My own council ordered me to hide her forever. Said she was a curse. Darren stared at the door. And you agreed? I obeyed, she whispered. To protect her, and my rule. Silence filled the hallway. Then the queen looked at Darren again. I married you to make a second chance, to show the council that humans are not a threat, that we can build a future. But I also hoped you might care, just enough to help her someday. She turned and walked away. Darren stood alone. The door still hummed. The silence behind it felt heavier than the crying. That night, Darren couldn't rest. His mind kept replaying her words. There was a child locked behind a door, his wife's child, and she was alone, afraid, forgotten by her own people. He looked out the window, stars shining above the alien world. Then he made a quiet promise. If no one else will fight for her, I will. A child, the queen can't speak. Of Darren waited until the moonlight faded. He moved silently through the palace like a shadow. Tonight he would not just listen to stories. Tonight he would meet her. The black iron door stood silent, but Darren's heart pounded. He placed his hand on the strange symbols. Nothing happened. Then he remembered what the queen did. He pressed his palm flat, then whispered softly, I'm not here to hurt you. The runes blinked once, then again. Click. The door unlocked. Inside was darkness. The cold air smelled like dust and sadness. He stepped inside slowly, and then he saw her. She was sitting in the far corner, hugging her knees. Her skin was pale silver. Her eyes, glowing faintly, watched him with fear. Darren raised his hands. "It's okay. I'm not a guard." She said nothing. She looked about 8, maybe 9, but something about her felt older, half human, half royal. The Queen's secret daughter, a child no one spoke of. "What's your name?" Darren asked gently. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "They said you would leave me too." Darren sat on the floor, leaving space between them. "I'm not going to leave." She looked unsure. "They always lie," she whispered. "Even my mother." Darren felt a sting in his chest. He didn't defend the Queen, because he wasn't sure if he could. He came back the next night, and the night after that. He brought her small things, books, a soft blanket, a broken music player he fixed just for her. Slowly, the girl began to talk. Her name was Kayla. She had never seen the stars, never touched the grass, never even left that cold room. She was a princess locked in a prison. Meanwhile, the Queen remained silent. She never asked Darren where he went at night. She never spoke of Kayla again, but Darren noticed her face, more tired, more distant. The weight of 2 worlds crushed her shoulders. The child she locked away, and the kingdom she tried to save. One day, Darren asked her directly, "Why don't you set her free?" They were alone on the palace balcony. The Queen stared out into the stars. "She is a symbol," she said quietly. "A half-blood, a reminder of failure to many, and fear to others. But she's also your daughter." The Queen turned. Her eyes shimmered. "Yes, and that's why I can't lose her." Darren said nothing more that night, but his decision was made. He returned to Kayla's room later, holding a small plant in a pot. "What's that?" she asked, blinking. "It's called a flower," he said, smiling. "From the garden. You've never seen one, right?" She touched it carefully, then whispered, "It smells alive." Darren watched her face glow with wonder. That moment was all he needed. He couldn't let her stay in darkness anymore. The next morning, he walked into the Queen's chamber without knocking. She looked surprised. "You're bold today," she said. Darren didn't smile. "I want her out." The Queen's face turned cold. "Darren, no. She's not a danger. She's just a little girl. And if you don't let her walk in the sun, I will." A long silence passed. Then the Queen looked away. I fear them, my people, if they see her. Then they'll have to see me standing beside her." Later that day, the palace garden was silent, until footsteps echoed. Guards turned, shocked, as the Queen stepped out with Darren by her side, and a young girl holding his hand. Kayla blinked in the sunlight for the first time. The guards gasped. Some reached for weapons. The Queen raised a hand. "No one will touch her," she said loudly. "She is my daughter, and one day she may be your ruler." The wind blew gently as Kayla walked across the grass, smiling with eyes full of light. It was the first time in her life she saw the sky, and she was not alone anymore. Enemies inside the palace. Whispers filled the palace like poison in the air. The Queen had broken tradition. She had let her hidden daughter walk freely through the royal gardens. And worse, she did it with a human holding the child's hand. To some it was bravery, to others it was treason. Darren didn't care what the noble said. He watched Kayla laugh as she played in the garden. Her feet touched grass. Sunlight kissed her face. Every moment with her made the risk worth it. But he could feel it too. The eyes. Guards watching him too long. Servants who bowed but didn't smile. Advisors who spoke too politely. Their words, sharp underneath. Something was coming. That night, the Queen held a private meeting in the strategy chamber. Darren stood by her side. Across the table sat her most powerful generals. One of them, the tall, green-skinned one with jagged armor, never once looked at the Queen. His eyes stayed locked on Darren. That man's name was Commander Dralek. He was the Queen's war hero, and her greatest threat. "You risk everything. For a half-blood child and a man not of our world," Dralek said sharply. The Queen kept her voice calm. "Kayla is of royal blood, and Darren is my husband." "You forget who we are," Dralek growled. "Our ancestors ruled galaxies. Now you bend to emotion, to weakness." "No," she said. "I bend to hope." The room went quiet. Drake stood and left without asking permission. That was the moment Darren knew. War had started, but from within. Later, Darren walked the halls with Kayla. She pointed to every glowing light and floating crystal with joy. "I didn't know the world could be this pretty," she said. Darren smiled. Then he stopped. A maid was watching them from behind a pillar. She quickly disappeared. That night, Darren found a strange note under his pillow. One word, burned into the paper. "Run." He took it straight to the Queen. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days. "Dralek," she said after reading the message. "He's moving faster than I thought." "We should leave," Darren said. "Take Kayla, escape." "No." Her voice was firm. "If we run, he wins. This palace is mine. I will not abandon it, or my daughter." She looked at Darren with softer eyes. "But I can't protect both of you if it comes to a fight." Darren reached for her hand. "Then let me protect you." The next evening, the palace gates were locked early. Dralek's personal guards took over the watchposts. Strange silence fell across the halls. Servants avoided eye contact. Darren felt it in his bones. A storm was about to strike. He rushed to Kayla's room. But when he opened the door, she was gone. The room was empty. The bed cold, a broken bracelet lay on the floor. His hands shook. "Kayla!" He raced through the palace, heart pounding. Behind a pillar he saw blood, small drops. He followed the trail until he found a hidden door open. And a voice inside. "You were never meant to live, little one," a soldier said. "You are a shadow of two worlds. No real blood. No throne." Darren kicked the door open with a roar. Kayla was tied to a chair. One of Dralek's men stood over her with a blade. Darren didn't hesitate. He grabbed a spear from the wall and charged. It wasn't a long fight, but it was loud. Guards came running. The Queen arrived seconds later. She saw her daughter in Darren's arms, and the unconscious soldier at his feet. She said nothing, but her hands trembled. That night, she gave a public speech. "This is not just about marriage, or blood, or tradition," the Queen declared. "It's about what kind of people we want to be." She looked at the nobles, the guards, and the advisors. "Kayla is my child. Darren is my chosen mate. Anyone who stands against them stands against me." Some bowed. Some did not, but no one spoke. Deep in the shadows of the palace, Dralek watched with cold eyes. The Queen had made her choice, and so would he. The Queen's war. The Queen had made her stand. But her enemies had been preparing for years. At sunrise, the sky above the capital turned red, not from the dawn, but from ships, dark warships, dozens of them. Dralek had moved faster than anyone expected. His forces rose not from outside the kingdom, but within it. Half the Queen's army defected overnight. The palace walls were no longer safe. Darren stood on the balcony holding Kayla in his arms. The little girl pointed up. "Those ships, they look angry," she whispered. "They are," he said quietly, "but we're not afraid." He turned to see the Queen standing behind him, already dressed in black battle armor, her crown replaced with a glowing helm. "I won't let them take this from us," she said. Her voice was low, steady, but her eyes were full of fire. The Queen ordered all loyal forces to gather in the palace grounds. Darren stood beside her, no longer just a husband but a defender of the throne. Kayla was taken to a hidden chamber, guarded by only the most loyal protectors. She must survive, the Queen said. Even if we don't. Darren nodded. If it comes to that, I'll get her out myself. By noon, the battle had begun. Explosions shook the palace walls. Red plasma bolts streaked through the sky. Towers burned. Statues fell. Darren fought alongside alien soldiers. Despite being human, he moved like one of them. Fast, brave, fearless. The soldiers began shouting his name. They had doubted him once. Not anymore. Inside the throne room, the Queen faced Dralek. He had broken through with his elite guard. His blade was already bloody. You were once my brother in arms, she said. And you were once wise, Dralek spat. But you let a human steal your mind, and a half-blood girl stain your bloodline. You fear change, the Queen said. That's why your time is over. Dralek roared and attacked. Their fight was savage, power against power, steel against energy. The floor cracked, pillars shattered, each blow echoed across the halls. But Dralek was strong. Too strong. He knocked the Queen to the ground and raised his sword. When a spear flew from behind straight into his side, Darren stood at the doorway, blood on his face, smoke rising from his armor. I warned you, he said. Dralek staggered. Turned. You, he charged. Darren met him head on. The clash was brutal. Fists, blades, fire. But Darren didn't back down. Not when Dralek knocked him down. Not when blood filled his mouth. Not even when the blade cut through his side. Because in his mind, he saw Kayla, alone, afraid, and he swore she'd never feel that again. In the final strike, Darren drove a broken sword into Dralek's chest. The general gasped and fell. The war was not over, but the heart of the rebellion had just stopped beating. The Queen crawled toward Darren, holding his face. You're hurt, she whispered. He smiled weakly. So are you. She leaned her forehead to his. Thank you, she said, voice breaking. You didn't just save me. You saved my people. No, Darren replied softly. We saved each other. Hours later, loyalists secured the palace. Rebel forces began to retreat. Fires were put out. The gates were sealed once more, and for the first time in years, the Queen stood before her people, not as a ruler above them, but as one of them. Beside her stood a human, and from behind her robes peeked a little girl with glowing eyes. Hope had survived the war, but peace still needed to be built. A new heir to the stars. The war was over, but the scars remained. Palace walls still carried the black burns of battle. Gardens once full of light now held broken statues. Yet inside the great healing chamber, a child's soft laugh echoed. Kayla was chasing glowing butterflies between beds of medicine plants. Her silver-blue skin glowed under the sun. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer hidden. Darren watched her from a window above. His body was still healing. His ribs hurt when he breathed too hard, but he smiled anyway. Behind him, the Queen entered silently. She looks happy, she said. She is happy, Darren answered. She's finally free. The Queen sat beside him. Her armor was gone. She wore simple robes now, like the people of her planet. Not a crown, not a title, just a mother. Do you regret marrying me? She asked suddenly. Darren looked at her, surprised. I mean, she added, looking down, you never asked for this. I chose you. I dragged you into my war, into my world. Darren gently reached for her hand. I didn't come here to be a king. I didn't even want to crash here, he said with a grin. But if I had to crash anywhere, I'm glad it was near you. She laughed softly. The first real laugh in weeks. Later that night, a great gathering was held in the capital. This time there was no forced wedding, no whispers, no guards watching with hate. This was different. This was history. Aliens, from all tribes and systems gathered. Flags of old enemies flew beside each other. The palace gates stood open. Children played in the gardens once stained with fire. The queen walked forward, Darren beside her, Kyla between them, holding both their hands. When they stood before the crowd, the queen raised her voice. "For too long, we were ruled by fear," she said. Fear of the unknown, fear of mixing blood, fear of change. She looked down at her daughter, who looked back up at her with pride. But now we begin again. With unity, with courage, with a future that carries both royal fire and human strength. She turned to Darren. "This is my husband, a man from a broken world who helped save mine. And this," she said, lifting Kayla's hand, "is my daughter, a child born of 2 stars, the first heir of a new empire." The crowd was silent. Then one by one, they knelt, not in fear, but in hope. That night, under a sky full of stars, Kayla sat between her parents. She looked up. "Will I ever go to Earth someday?" Darren smiled. "Maybe one day, but you have a lot of work to do here first." The queen nodded. "You will rule one day, Kayla, but not just with power, with love." The girl yawned and leaned against Darren's side. He gently pulled a blanket over her. Far above them, a small ship left orbit. Inside were the last of Dralek's soldiers, exiled and forgotten, but they did not carry hope. They carried only fear, a fear of a future they could no longer control. Back on the palace balcony, Darren looked to the stars. "So," he said, "this is what destiny feels like." The queen leaned into him. "No," she whispered. "This is what family feels like." They stood in silence, watching the night sky together, a queen, a human, and the little girl who would one day lead them all.